for coming. If you have problems hearing, just let me know. I'm going to introduce Dr. Tatiana Sanders. She's the professor. I'm just
She's the professor.
So, thank you for coming. I'm going to come around and give you some handouts while Tatiana's doing her part. And if you can't see, you might want to move your chairs up to the front because you might do a little writing on the board, and I have a few slides to show you. And where's Father Greg? When you're ready, Father, we're ready to give you the opening prayer.
Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to read a prayer that we use actually in our Divine Liturgy, which is our main service. And of course, the center part of the service is the reading of the Gospel, which in our Greek churches is often done in the original and in English. But before we read the Gospel, we read a prayer before the Gospel. So I'm going to read this for you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Master, lover of mankind, make the pure light of your divine knowledge shine in our hearts, and open the eyes of our mind to understand the message of your gospel. Implant in us a fear of your blessed commandments, so that having trampled down all carnal desires, we may change to a spiritual way of life, thinking and doing all things that are pleasing to you. For you are the illumination of our souls and bodies, Christ God. And to you we give glory together with your Father, who is without beginning, and your all holy, good, and life-giving Spirit, now and ever and unto the ages of ages.
Amen. Thank you, Father. I'll introduce myself, and then I'm going to give the mic to Dr. Summers. I'm Jim Wright. I'm Mark Greek. My grandfather came from Greece, and he taught me Greek when I was 2, and I spoke it fluently for a 2-year-old. And when I talk to you in modern Greek, you'll say that I still speak like a 2-year-old. I forgot most of it, and we didn't speak it in the home. And so I had to go to school, the university, and take some Greek classes, and I've had many wonderful Greek teachers in the church that helped me along. And now we have Tatiana that's going to help us further. So I taught this class for 5 years to other groups, mostly non-Greek speakers, but some Greek speakers who wanted to learn ancient or Hebrew Greek. And we had a lot of fun, so that's my goal for you here, to learn and have fun at the same time. I'm going to be the helper of that. And if you are native Greek speakers, how many of you are? Or know some Greek spoken at home? There's some hands. I know some of you know more than we think. Okay. Well, you'll be able to help, and if I make a mistake, I want you to correct me. I told Dr. Summers that too, so I'm sure there'll be plenty, so we'll all learn together. Here's Tatiana.
Thank you, Jim. I have 2 of these now. I don't know what's. Let's see if this.
Have our attention.
This is what we have to do. Okay. So yes, Jim called me Dr. Summers, but he is also he's a doctor. He's a surgeon actually, working here at UAB. Most of you know me. I was born in Greece. My Greek name is Tatiana Tsakiropoulou Summers, and by the end of the class you'll be able to say it fluently. So I grew up there. I went to the University of Thessaloniki, where I was born, yes. And then after I left, Father Gregory had the great idea of going there to do his PhD while I was here. So finally we met at Birmingham, as fate would have it. So I've been teaching ancient Greek. I'm in the classics department at University of Alabama. And I've been teaching ancient Greek for a very long time. I'm not going to tell you for how long. So quite a long time. And Biblical Greek is not too much different from ancient Greek. It's just evolved. It's 500 years later from classical Greek, so it tends to become more simpler, and it tends to become easier in its structure. So this is the good news for the night. So I would like I would like you to introduce yourselves. Just say just a word or two about your background and your interest in Greek.
Thank you. I'm Adam Spurtevant, and I heard about this class and my girlfriend Alex. And I haven't studied Latin in high school. I just thought this would be a great opportunity to learn more classic language.
Hi, I'm Alexandra, and I go to church here, and I thought this would be fun to do.
Hey, I'm Christy Savage. This is my daughter, Alexandra. I'm actually a first-generation American, so I grew up speaking Greek, and I'm probably going to be at ground zero here.
I'm Kim Cambioris. I also go to church here and heard about this class and thought it would be interesting.
I'm Andrew Ritchie. I go to church down the street at St. Simeon Orthodox Church, and I don't know very much Greek at all.
My name is Jeremy Winta. I am Julie Jacobides and Dino Jacobides' kid. I am interested in comparative linguistics, and I thought this would be a great class to take.
I'm Julie Jacobides. My husband is a member here. I don't know any Greek except a few curse words, I think. I know that. But I'm here to learn.
I'm Rhonda Yearout. I go to church here, and I don't know very much Greek, just in the liturgy since I've been here a long time.
I'm Cindy Spaganis, and I know no Greek, but I've been here a long time, and like Rhonda, have picked up a little bit, but am interested in the class.
I'm Ethan. My friend, coworker, mentor Dan told me about this class. The only thing I know about Greek are what the symbols mean in my physics courses.
I'm Dan Root. I'm a member here in this parish, and I'm mostly isolated because I'm working on a PhD here at UAB, and I know about zero Greek other than what my good friend Ethan just said, and it makes sense of some of the symbols.
I'm Tina Fogel. I'm also a member here, and I grew up speaking Greek with my grandparents.
My name is John Lucas. I'm over here as well. Spent some time in Greece and looking forward to finding out some more information.
My name is Laurel Parker. My grandparents were Greek speakers. My grandmother used to teach Greek in her church. I grew up in Methodist church, and I'm great somebody.
I'm Michael Dozel, and I go to church here. I live by the lake.
Susan Gerbil, and I also go to church here, and I thought it would be interesting to take this one.
Pete Vogel, also a member. Zero Greek, so this is all Greek to me.
Thanks, Vincent. I'm a member here, and I would like to learn more ways I can follow along the service a little bit.
My name is Paris Wilson, and I'm also a member here, and I was interested in learning more. My name is Annie Henson, and I'm also a member here, and it's be a good time to learn some Greek.
I'm Stephanie Cariotis, and grew up with Greek parents and Greek grandparents. My grandma came over on the boat, so to speak, and fled the war from Turkey. And I know no Greek, so I'm here to learn all I can.
I'm Loretta Garrison, and I'm here because I want to read the scriptures in Greek. Every class I've ever seen and podcast always says, but what this really means is, and I want to do that myself if I can. So thank you. I've been waiting for this for 10 years. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Greg Cariotis. I do know Greek. I know enough to get me in trouble sometimes. But I have a lot of family in Greece. I've always wanted to learn more about the Greek in the New Testament and Old Testament. So therefore, when I go back to see my cousins in Greece, I'll know exactly what they're saying.
My name is Gregson Witt. I'm a student at Central University. I'm also in the choir here at this church. I would like to learn Greek because, as historically it is, it was the language of most of the New Testament, and also to help with services when I'm trying to get into understanding Orthodox life.
I'm John Sullivan. I'm John Sullivan.
Go here as well. Don't know much about Greek and been interested to understand translations that everybody talks about. So that's why I'm here.
My name is Yorgos Steras. I'm actually Catholic, but my dad is from Greece, as you can tell by my name. So I grew up speaking Greek a lot with him, and I can read it okay. I can read it, but I don't know what all those words mean, but I have a good foundation that makes all the Greek.
I'm Roger Steele. I'm a recent convert to Orthodox in the church here. It's like everyone else, to learn as much Greek as I can.
Hi, my name is Jim Stone. I do not go to church here. I do not know Greek, but I do know Father Gregory. I'm looking forward to learning some Greek for some of the same reasons. As being one of the original languages of the Bible, give me a better understanding of what I read, because I only understand English. So I look forward to the deeper understanding of God's Word.
I'm Neil Evans. So our sons who are 18 speak fluent languages. So I want to know superpower. I'll be embarrassed by that.
My name is Jennifer McClure. I'm a member here and a professor at Sanford, and I know what the Greek means in statistics, but I'd like to know what it means for the church and the Bible.
I'm Lee Johnson. I'm a member here. I took Greek, Koine Greek, probably 45 years ago, and have forgotten everything I ever knew. So I decided this is the time to redo that.
My name is Buddy Beatrice. I was born and raised in this church. I grew up when Greek was the only thing spoken in the house. My grandparents, nobody spoke English. Very few. My father was born in Greece. Anyway, I'm here to, like a refresher course. Being so-American, I hate to say that. I've lost my ability to read and write and understand a lot of things in the native language. So that's my goal.
My name is Najma Baker, and I've been in this church at least 15 years. I've been with the Greek families, and I'm of the Greek Orthodox faith from Jerusalem area, and I love the Greek language. I can read pretty much the liturgy, but not fast enough. And I understand quite a bit what people speak around me, but I still want to learn more, especially the liturgy.
Evening, everybody. My name is Barry Graffio. I'm over here. I'm probably the opposite of Greg. I don't know enough Greek to get myself in trouble. I know enough Greek to know when I am in trouble. This is pretty often. So I'm here like most everybody else. It's a connection to the original text, and to be able to see that on your own would be something that would be just a really enlightening.
Hi, I'm Jackie Eastman, and I'm a member here, and I sing in the choir. And one reason I really like to learn the biblical Greek is that so much of what we sing is in it. I have studied Greek a little bit with a Greek woman teacher through what's basically Skype. So I've done that, but I don't yet speak it fluently by any stretch. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think we're just extremely fortunate to have such professional teachers for free. Are you kidding me? It's awesome.
Well, we can put the price tag on that. We're debating it. So, yeah, hadn't decided whether we should start you with the third declension or not, but I think you convinced me that we need to start with the alphabet. Right? So, let's see what we can do.
Okay. Better? Ooh. Maybe to the bottom. So just a little housekeeping. There's a sign-up sheet. I don't know where it is now. Table back there. If you haven't signed up, please do so we can send you emails about the class. If you have to cancel it for weather or something, or want to send you some instructional materials, information, we can do that. And your phone number in case that doesn't work. Please write legibly. We're pretty good at looking at funny symbols and deciphering them, but we want to be able to make sure we got your email right at least. And a couple words on the goals and purpose of this class, and some of you have expressed them. This class is about learning to read the Bible in Greek, the New Testament and the Old Testament, the Septuagint, and to understand it. And the best way we can express it in English, which isn't always possible to do as well as it's expressed in Greek, but we'll work on that. And also, I'll cover this a little bit later to give you some Greek culture and certainly culture of the first century, and so you can fully understand as much as we can in this modern age what is actually said in the Bible. And if you don't feel like you've achieved that, we'll give you your full refund. So that's a burden. I just want to say another word or two. Some of people are intimidated by learning a foreign language. You're not going to be able to pop on the street in Athens and rattle away in ancient Greek when we're done probably, but don't worry about that. Greek is a wonderful treasure. There are 150,000 words in Greek, 50,000 in English. There are many ways of expressing yourself in Greek. It's like going into a treasure house. So if you go away from this class with a few tokens, a few pieces of knowledge that bring illumination to your faith and knowledge, that's good. And I think that's what we all should do. Not to feel like you've fallen behind and you'll never learn it fluently. That's not the goal of this class. We want you to be able to read the Bible and pick the treasure out of it. And very simple. So, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. Oh, okay. I'm going to show you some things. The next three things I think I have. So on the screen here, not this pretty picture, but I'll get to that. So you can know what we need for the class and where we're going with a few things about culture. Let's see. Might be, oh, here we go. So, welcome to Biblical Greek. This is the Feast of the Elevation of the Cross. Isis Eaton Savu, and that's just the feast for today. So why do we study Greek? Well, of course we want to learn the Bible in the original language. That's why most of you are here. But to do that, we're going to participate in an ancient civilization. Why do we want to do that? To understand the Bible fully, we need to understand ancient thought. What were the people in the first century thinking when they heard these words? You can't understand what's written in the Bible unless you get some inkling of that. I can't understand it fully. And appreciate the original literature. Greek is a beautiful language. It's very expressive. And we're going to gain some appreciation of that in this class. And probably more importantly, to gain another way of seeing the world. We are most unfortunate to live in this time when we have people who are atheists, Western thought, and the Enlightenment from then on, the last 300 years, has in some way changed our thought from the way people in the ancient world and the early Christians thought. How many of you, if you could, would like to have a time machine, travel safely back to the first century and see what it was like, and to participate in that life, and then return here safely, of course? You know, we are going to do that as well as we can. So you're going to get a taste of that. Of course, we can't really be there, but we're going to understand how they thought to a certain extent, what the words meant to them, and how they applied that to their lives. And so that's called an Eastern mindset, and you can't truly be Orthodox, or I think understanding the New Testament the way it was written for those people without having some of that. The Western mindset, all the things that came with the approach with Father Gregory and more knowledge we talk about have changed our way of thinking about the Bible. So we're going to think about it in a different way. And then it should be fun, dynamic, and I hope it's that way for all of us. Some of the teachers, Greek, and God bless the Protestants who give us a lot of materials and teach it in their seminaries. Sometimes they teach it, and I'm going to quote Bill Mounts, one of the leading textbook authors. He says, well, this is irksome and burdensome and not fun, but you have to learn Greek in order to save souls. And that is not our approach. We're going to have fun and enjoy the beauty. So what Winston Churchill said, I make everybody learn English, and Jackie is our English professor here. One of the things you got to understand a few things about English grammar and the way language works to understand Greek. And some of us forgot it, and some of us didn't get taught that in school. So you want to take, you've got some paper, and whoever your principal or dean was, you write, dear Dean so-and-so, I request a refund, and just leave it open because there are going to be several boxes you want to check. And so, what I'm going to say is, don't be afraid. Fear not, because we're going to enjoy it, and everybody's going to progress. Some of you will progress rapidly. You've got some knowledge of Greek, and you're just picking up the language easily. Okay, good for you. Some of you will go more slowly, but everybody's going to get something out of it. And so, Tatiana and I might divide the class up, and we're working with different groups at different speeds, and so everybody gets something. So, how do we understand the Bible in Greek? We need three things. And the first thing is the best English translation. So, if you've gone to a seminary, a non-Orthodox seminary, and they taught you Greek, this is probably all you're going to get. The closest English word that we can to understand the Greek language. And that's helpful. That's the key of it. We got to start with that. But once we have that, and you'll be surprised at some of the things that are in English. They don't say that in Greek. You find that out all the time. So that's the first step. Second, what did that mean to the audience for which it was written? So we have to go back to the first century, and you have to learn enough about Hellenistic culture and society to fully appreciate that. In fact, the church fathers say that people like Alexander the Great, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle helped prepare the way for Christianity by developing the Hellenic civilization, the Greek civilization, which is throughout the whole Mediterranean and Middle Eastern world, and that was prepared to receive the wonderful message of Christianity. And finally, what does the church teach about the passage? So we have two things. We have, of course, modern teachers, elder paisios, elders and priests, clergy who can help teach us. And then we also have the church fathers, people who wrote in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries, and even later, who wrote in Greek and expressed what this meant. People closer to the time of Jesus than we are now. And I would say some of you are not Orthodox. That's okay. Your church might teach something different, but you will, to fully understand it, for your denomination or your church, you're going to have to go sometimes to your church leaders and ask them, what does this passage mean in our church? That's okay. Our goal isn't to convert anybody in this class, it's to teach you Greek. One thing about Greek culture, especially in the 1st century, was something I'll call a Hellenic triad. I didn't make this up. What was it? Aletheia, the truth, Kalos, the good, and Kalos, the beautiful. Same word for beauty and goodness. And why do I bring this up? Imagine being in a civilization where the young people, the millennials, those people were very devoutly pursuing virtue. That was the goal. That's incredible. No, we could talk more about what virtue was, but this is what their goal was, to be a good citizen and a virtuous citizen, whether they were men or women. something we seem to have lost in this modern age. So the truth, of course, the source of knowledge, but for the ancients, truth was objective, not relational or subjective, or what's true for you is for you, but for me, I have a different truth. No, the whole society had one truth, and they spent a great deal of time and effort working on that. The beautiful, I like to say the Greeks were and still are captivated by beauty. And beauty is something which is objective. They did not rely on artists to tell what beautiful was this year, like they do in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Beauty was a cultural thing, and beauty came from God, and it was objective. And they even had rules to define beauty. And through beauty, you can be saved. Well, did they say that? Well, not in so many words, but the Russians certainly did through Dostoevsky. So beauty is part of your journey to salvation. And finally, the good. And good, another objective thing, which is sometimes hard to define, but good is connected to beauty and truth. And when Jesus said, just give me an example, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father but by me. When he said those words, and you said that in the first century to a Greek person, a Greek citizen, they would immediately connect with that and say, okay, we're interested. And I don't know if St. Paul said that on the Areopagus when he was talking, but it certainly would resonate very deeply. Okay, a couple of books we need. We need to have the textbook. So, and this is I think I gave you a handout with a list of blacks. Learn to read New Testament Greek is fairly economical. I think $16 or $18. You can get it on Amazon new. And that's what we're going to use in the class. There's a Kindle edition, but if you're trying to do that on your iPad here, there's something that the pages, and it's the same text, but the pages are different. And it's almost the same price, so I recommend you get the book you can actually hold and try and get out with. I tell you, we're going to page 7. Tatiana gave you the homework assignments. She's already got it stacked up for you. Just kidding. You'll know where to go. And then it's good to have a Greek Bible. There's several out there, and the one I like is this one listed. I think it's actually out of print. You can get a used edition, and it's somewhat expensive, about $45. You can get one for about $20, and they're different. Well, at some point, we might go into different biblical texts in Greek, but this one is an interlinear one, and what I mean by that is that each word in Greek has the English translation underneath it. So you can look, if you don't know any Greek, you can look. And there are other interlinear Bibles out there. You might, before you buy one, you might want, if you're not going to buy this one, which is big enough to see, some of them, the print is so small, you practically need a magnifying glass. And you can see, when I taught it before, we have things called diacritics, accent marks in Greek, more in ancient Greek than modern Greek. But my students would say, what are those dirt marks on the page? I said, those are accent marks and reading marks and diacritics. You need to see them. Well, we can't see them. Okay, wear your reading glasses. Well, we look old when we do that. And so I'm saying you've got to be able to see those. So if you're buying a Bible and it has really tiny print, it might be a problem for you. Or you're going to have to use magnifying glasses. And then there's about 30 internet resources I can give you, but I'm just going to give you these two in your handout. I'm going to try to click on them. The first is the Greek New Testament. And the one, if you want to be accurate, the one we use in church is the Patriarchal Text, and the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese has this online. And you can click on that and get it. And that's the text that's used in church. And there are other texts out there, so if you buy certain Greek Bibles, you say, well, my Bible doesn't say that. Okay, fine, that's one of the other texts, and we'll go into that later. But mostly, most of it's the same. And then this last one, I'll try to click on for you. Okay, good. So you can get an interlinear Bible on the New Testament. These are mostly Protestant sources. Let me see if I can magnify this for you. If you don't have the Greek Bible and you want to, let's see, I have to do the plus on it. it doesn't get bigger. Okay. If you want to read it in Greek, there's Greek here, and I'm just going to give you a couple warnings. And underneath it, oh, it's not doing anything for you. Okay. Hang on a minute. Well, anyway, if you click on this, let's see if I can make this happen for you. No. Well. Anyway, when you click on that, you'll see the writing in Greek. And then underneath or on top of it, there'll be the academic pronunciation. Don't use that. You'll be speaking wrong from modern Greek, so we'll go over that later. But if you just want to see the word in Greek and the word in English, and then they also parse it for you. They'll tell you it's a noun, a verb, vegetable, animal, mineral, that type of thing, and what kind of case it is, or what declension, all that stuff. That's in there too, and you can also click on a brief dictionary version of it. So that's helpful. You can play with it, and we might get into that more later, but that's a nice tool to start with. So if you don't have any or anything about it, get on that side, the one that's similar to it, and take it from there. I think that's all I'm going to tell you right now, because you're going to actually learn something useful from Tatiana.
Interesting. Okay. When Father asked us, what do you guys need for the first day, it seems that a projector and a screen. I said, a whiteboard. So here we are. Wonderful. So, first of all, he mentioned the accent marks. When I did Greek to my students, I tell them that I'm preparing them for becoming actually surgeons. Because these are small things that they need to train their eyes to pick up, so when they operate on me, they don't forget things inside me. But I'm not going to make you learn the accent marks. I will give you an overview so that you understand what you're looking at, so that they don't look like dirt marks. And then you will ignore them, because you need them in order to write Greek. You're not going to be writing Greek, you're going to be reading it and trying to understand it. So that's for that remark. The other remark I saw on the screen, Jim had not the Orthodox version, which brings me to my first little bit here, that is, let's say, the reliability of the Greek New Testament. So I thought that you might have a few questions about the New Testament, the Greek. It's been so long. Do we have anything worth reading actually, thousands of years later? Do we have a made-up text or anything that's original, and how original can it be? So here it goes. First of all, you all know that the original was written in Greek, of course, but why wasn't it written in Greek? You had fishermen there, writing in Greek, not in Hebrew, not in Latin, in Greek, because Greek was the lingua franca of the time. It was called, they mentioned the Koine Greek, which we're going to be calling Gini in our pronunciation. But after Alexander had conquered everything up to the Indus River, so 300 years before Christ's birth, he and his successors established Greek schools all over the place, Pakistan, Afghanistan, what is today actually Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, Iraq, Iran, and children were learning Greek in order to become part of the administration, part of the federal force there, officials. The local people, he made them citizens, those that he had conquered, and then sent them to school, learn Greek. But to me, that was a plan of God. He unified the world linguistically. Everybody was speaking the same language. 300 years later, Jesus comes, and everybody from the fishermen to the soldiers, the Roman soldiers who were there, could speak Greek, of course, with different degrees of Greek. Some words, some phrases, read literature, it depended. So that's why it was written in Greek. The Greek was spoken for 1800 years in that Middle East area, from 300 BC to the 15th century AD, roughly. So, in the pop culture, quite often you hear, you read that the text of the New Testament has been corrupted and it's not good and so on. So I have a few, three actually examples. One is from literature. You're familiar with the Da Vinci Code. At some point, Denver writes, the Bible has evolved through countless translations, editions, and revisions. He talks about translations, which is a different matter, actually. History has never had a definitive version of the book. So he conflates translations and text and Greek text, no good. And here I say totally false, proven by textual criticism, and we'll talk about textual criticism and what it means and what it does. All right, Werleman, a journalist, wrote, we do not have any of the original manuscripts of the Bible. The originals are lost. What we have are copies of copies of copies. Well, technically this is true, but for all intents and purposes, it's totally false. And we will talk about the whys. And then there's a recent book, The History of the Quranic Text by Al-Azami, who compares the Old and New Testaments to the Quran. And he pronounces that the Orthodox Church, being the sect which eventually established supremacy over all the others, stood in fervent opposition to various ideas, that's heresies, which were in circulation. As a result, the Orthodox Church deliberately corrupted the scriptures so as to reflect its own theological visions of Christ while demolishing that of all rival sects. I don't know where to begin to demolish this thing. First of all, there was no Orthodox Church at the beginning. For 1,000 years, the church was one. Orthodox became later, after the Great Schism and such. So, deliberately corrupted the scriptures so that we would be proven right. So, there we are. We'll talk more about it in a minute. So, what is textual criticism? Textual criticism is a science, a philological science, where trained classicists like me, I know how to do textual criticism, take manuscripts, compare them, decide which manuscript came from which was the earliest, which is the latest, and the critical criterion is mistakes. So I can tell who of my students copies from whom based on their errors. Okay, you cannot make the same mistake with somebody else, just on your own, right? Okay. So there are rules and there are principles and there are methods by which you look at these manuscripts and you decide which ones were in the same family, which ones were copied from which one was influenced by another family, and slowly you restore the text. And we'll talk about that, what it means. And the point of it is to reach the autograph. The autograph is the text that the author wrote. And that's the science. It's like medicine. We have methods of restoring the health of a person. We have a science of restoring the text. So, how close do philologists get to their goal? Very close. Very, very close. Like 99.999%. Okay. And I will show you why. The proof of it is when papyri come up to light. The originals were written in papyri, right? Papyrus is a plant. They turn to dust very quickly. But there were people who threw their tattered papyri scrolls to the trash, right? In Egypt, where it's dry, and then they put sand top, perfect climate for preserving papyri. So those trash heaps and landfills of antiquity, they're treasure troves for philologists, where we have found some papyrus scraps with the Greek text. And lo and behold, that papyrus, which was written in the 2nd century AD, is the same text that we have today. 99%, okay? So, pretty good job. So we have 140 papyri of the New Testament, small scraps that actually contribute a lot to the restoration of the text, or the proof of its restoration. So do we have the original documents of the New Testament? No, but we have 5,000 complete manuscripts of the New Testament. Complete meaning all the books in Greek, okay, complete. 5,000 of those, okay? Over 140 papyri fragments and over 1 million quotes of the early church fathers who quoted the scriptures, making their points. But the literature is also a source for philologists to take those quotes and say, okay, how does he quote that? Because he's looking at something. Compare it to what we have, and then work with that. All right, so the next page, on page 2, I'm talking about the New Testament manuscript tradition and how it compares to the classical tradition, to Greek and Latin authors. All right, this will blow your mind. We have very few classical manuscripts, but a whole lot of the New Testament. Manuscripts are those, that are handwritten, okay, over and over on the copies. Very few early ones for the classical literature. For example, if you put them on top of the other, for the classical literature, you would come up to this point. For the New Testament, a Bible and a half of manuscripts. So it's the riches we have for very close to the original text manuscripts is unbelievable. So to give you an example, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Right? Anybody here doubts that we have the text that we have, that we're reading of the Iliad or the Odyssey is pretty close, like 99% of the original? Nobody doubts that. And yet, the earliest manuscript we have of the Iliad and the Odyssey come from the 9th century AD. That's 1,000 years, a little bit over, less than 1,000 years after Homer wrote. Right? So the first manuscript we have is 1,000 years after Homer wrote. For the New Testament, 4th century AD. So it's about, 300 years after it was written, roughly. Alright? So 300 years for the New Testament, the earliest manuscripts that we have, 1,000 years from Homer. So you see that the philologists with Homer have done a great job. They know how to restore that text. And they have also restored, the New Testament text. All right, so as I said, the earliest manuscript comes for the New Testament comes from the 4th century AD, but that's the complete copy, like all the books and all the letters of Paul and everything. But from individual Gospels and letters, they go very far closer, even closer to the original. So you see that John, we have the earliest copy of John, 125 AD. Right? John died in 90 AD. Right? He wrote his Gospel a couple of decades before he died. And we have a 125 AD manuscript. So, what is the problem here? If you can see Matthew's 150 AD, Mark, I don't know what's going on with this. So from all the Gospels come from at least 175 AD, and Paul's letters come from 175 AD as well. So we have copies of those. So are there a lot of variants in the New Testament manuscripts? Yes. If you have ever tried to copy anything, even a name, people make mistakes. For example, one of the rules is the wandering eye. So you look at the text here, you look and you go there and you read and go back and write, and you see two words that are the same on the page. And I don't know why the brain does that, but as you do this movement, it skips from the top word to the bottom word, picks up the bottom word, and you continue writing from the bottom word. And sometimes you're tired enough to not realize that the meaning has changed. It has happened to me, and I was shocked. It happened after I had learned about this rule, and I was shocked that I made that mistake. It's just the mind, takes the shortest route to being able to do that. Or, for example, you repeat things. You wrote a sentence and then you rewrite it, and you're so tired that you don't realize that you repeated a sentence. Sometimes scribes look at the text and they say, oh my goodness, this word is so old, it's obsolete, nobody uses this word anymore. And either they will write a synonym, a common synonym in the margins, or they will put it in a parenthesis, or replace it altogether. So you have some manuscripts that have the old word, the more difficult word, and then you start having manuscripts that have the synonym. Well, it's obvious. Which one? I'm not going to replace a common word with a hard word, right? When I write. And so this is a rule. You see this happening, you just eliminate the common synonym and bring into the text the harder word. And then people will open a dictionary and figure out what it means. So, some other examples. They will incorporate definitions, or they incorporate interpretations of of a difficult passage. And again, you see some manuscripts that don't have this interpretation, and others that do have it. Immediately you know what the corruption is, and you eliminate the additional text, and you have the correct text. There are also some passages, especially with Paul there, very difficult, and some scribes have tried to make them run more smoothly. But that's when you see a rough passage, that's usually a Hebrew idiom. When it's big, sometimes I translate my Greek idioms into English, and you're like, what? What is that? That's what they would do. They would take the Hebrew idioms or Aramaic, and they would translate them into Greek, and of course, it doesn't make very good sense, but it's the original text. And so the editor has to take out the smooth expression, the smooth line, and replace it with the more difficult one. So, what is the bearing of variance on the meaning of the text? In the end, 99% of the variants are of these categories that I just described, which an editor can easily correct and restore the text by comparing manuscripts. Spelling errors or conjugations, we have the wrong tense for the verb, the wrong form, and so on. I mean, they were foreign speakers. This was a second language for them. This is understandable. Or different word order. So this doesn't have any bearing on Greek. Different word order. I mean, you have take the phrase, John loves Mary, okay? In English, how many ways do you have to say John loved Mary and still have the same meaning? Only one. In Greek, you have at least 9. Not prolific. As you will find out, the Greek language is inflected. So the subject has its own case, the object has its own case, and it doesn't matter where you put it in the sentence. You can always go hunt for your subject, it may be the last word, and in English you have to grab your subject, put it in the English first, and then put your verb, and then put your object. But in Greek, you have no problem putting any grammar. They had a rhyme and reason, don't think that they were crazy. It always has the same meaning. So if you have 30 copies that you have 9 different ways of saying John loves Mary, which is not just an example, they're not wrong, right? That doesn't have any bearing on meaning. And then there are a few other variants, like 1%, which has some significance on the meaning. And textual criticism again eliminates problems, but Father has this book here, which is an edition of the text. He has the English translation here and the Greek text on the other side. And if you look at the bottom, there is a huge paragraph in small print that has some gobbledygook things. Well, these gobbledygook things are variants. Variants. So your editor says, listen, this may be important for you when you take this book. And I don't want to take away from you the opportunity to rethink what might be the original word here. So here I'm telling you which manuscripts have this other word. And if you think that I'm wrong, you're right, make your own edition. You're welcome to do that. But the stuff that they find in these manuscripts is not lost. At least those that are significant, because if you have 5,000 manuscripts, you realize we have over 300,000 variants. The most important, make it into an edition and allows you to make up your own mind about it. So there is a lot of flexibility and a lot of peace of mind as to what kind of text we're dealing with. So, should we doubt the authority of the New Testament text? Who doubts the authority of the New Testament text? I'm very convincing. Why did Dan Brown say that we do not have a definitive version of the book? As I said, totally wrong. Werleman said we do not have any of the original manuscripts of the Bible, only copies. As you see, that's not really a problem. And Al-Azami said the Orthodox Church deliberately corrupted the scriptures. That had to be a huge conspiracy over a lot of people over thousands of years for everybody to try to keep the Orthodox Church correct. You know, the one who wins. No. It doesn't happen this way. Science doesn't work that way. If that's the word in there, I'm going to put it in there. I don't care who interprets it this way or that way. So that's about the text. Do you have any questions? Yes. Okay. Loretta is asking me to pronounce the word K-O-I-N-E. All right. You're familiar with the pronunciation koine. By the New Testament times, the pronunciation has evolved and is kimi. So we'll talk in a minute about the pronunciation. Any other questions? Yes.
On the page at the bottom, it says, do we have the original documents in the New Testament? And you said, no, but we have over 5,000 complete manuscripts of the Greek New Testament. I'm not understanding the difference. What do you mean 5,000 complete manuscripts?
Complete means all the Gospels, all 4 Gospels, and all the epistles. That's a complete manuscript. The others, as I said, there are some manuscripts that have only John. Some manuscripts have only Matthew. Some have only Paul's letters.
By manuscript, you mean copied by hand from the original.
Copied by hand, that's what manuscript means, copied by hand. Until the didn't know something when printing was invented, everything was copied by hand. So the manuscripts I'm counting here is from 2nd century AD all the way to 1500 something. So as you see, yes, some are airier than others, and some carry more weight than others, but yeah. Anything else? Yes, Loretta.
Oh, we have the triangle letters coming. True, beautiful, and good. So beautiful and good, are they the same words?
Yes, it's the same word, kalos, and depending on the context, you know whether it means a good person or a beautiful person. There are vases that have paintings of athletes, or you know, and on what they have sometimes their names, and they say Carlos. You know, he's beautiful as an athlete, he's a perfect body. But there are other texts like Plato. He's interested in a good citizen. There, Carlos will mean good. I mean, good, morally good, or upright person. Anything else? Okay, so I want to show you one example of what it means to know Greek and how you're going to use your Greek. And as Loretta said before, everyone says what this really means. So I'm going to get to one of those what it really means kind of situations. Alright, so that's my translation problems with the Our Father prayer that handout. And I have, of course, the Our Father. So we work with one translation. I think this is kind of a standard New King James version of the Our Father. Okay, and there are two words that I will talk about. One is the daily bread that I have highlighted and underlined. That's, I think, the other handout. No, not that one. Is it Our Father on top? Yes, that handout, and you will find Our Father somewhere. Okay, but he has it. So, it's my favorite thing to do, writing on the board. So, daily bread, right? I mean, you would think that this is problematic translation. No, you repeat it every day.
I've heard it's a problem.
You heard it's a problem. Thank goodness, I'm not making up stuff. I have a witness here, yes. The Greek word for this is epiousios, okay? And I'm going to write it here, transliterated, because you don't know your Greek letters yet. Epiousios. Okay? Alright, so first of all, you see that epi here. Okay? Epi, you've heard from epinephrine, you know, epi is on top of or above. Alright? So, and ousios means substance. It's a substance, a substantial. Okay? So, in Greek, the word for daily is what I have here, to kathemerinon. Very different from epiousios. Okay? And I'm going to say something that should impress you. The word epiousios is extremely rare. Extremely rare. I opened the dictionary, and it appears for the first time, you know where it appears? In this prayer. Matthew and Luke, they have the same word for the same concept. So Christ used either an Aramaic word that meant this, or a Greek word, because he knew some Greek. Okay? And what epiousios really means is super substantial, super from epi, right, on top of, and this is the substantial. So this is the super substance. It's not your Publix bread. I mean, daily bread means Publix bread, right? But that's not what it's talking about. And so under the brief historical overview, I say that the first time it appears is in this prayer in the New Testament, in Matthew and Luke. Later, after it was printed, military picked it up and made it the daily bread, the daily food, the portion for a soldier who would go on a trip for a day. So they would call it viaticum in Latin. Viaticum. This is the via is the road, the viaticum is of the road. So then, in the 4th century, Jerome translated Abusius, translated the whole Bible in Latin, and he used the words panem supersubstantialem, which means supersubstantial bread, which means that in the church at the time, this was the church was one, right? It was not Catholic and Orthodox. It was one. It was the 3rd century. That was the understanding of this word, that it was a supersubstantial bread. And that lasted until the 16th century, when the reformers adopted the later meaning of viaticum and changed the Abusius into panem quotidianum, you see here, which means actually daily bread, which is what you need to survive for a day. And from then on, it made it into the King James translation, and it's been around since then. But what it really means, Loretta, is supersubstantial bread. And I just went down with that, and I wanted to say that even sense-wise, it doesn't make sense to call it daily bread, because Christ was never concerned about the material world. I mean, he needed, and we don't need to be encouraged, to take care of our daily needs. He said in Matthew 6, your heavenly Father knows what you need. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink. And so he rather wants people to seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and then this is achieved through this super substantial bread. And he keeps talking about the bread of God. I'm the bread of life. I'm the bread that came down from heaven. I'm the living bread. This bread is my flesh. I mean, how many times does he have to say? And then in the prayer he teaches us, he has that Abusius, and he comes up with a new word that didn't exist to describe something that didn't exist before. It's a new concept and a new thing. The communion bread is a new idea. And so he comes up with a new word for that. So, that's my little bit about the bread. Does anybody have any questions about it?
I have a comment or maybe an observation.
Yeah.
Is it possible that they use daily bread because the ancient Israelites went up to get their bread every day, the manna, and maybe that's where it came from, that the correlation or the parallelism is that daily you have to go out and get your bread. That might have been the source of why they translated it that way. Is it possible?
So the reformers did that in the 15th century. Up until then, the concept was supersubstantial bread. So to me, it has more to do with the reformers not wanting to do the same thing as the Catholics, to something that's different, especially on the sacraments. And so, but they did have, there's Beza, who was a good classicist and a theologian, and he wrote a very long note about this, but I haven't read too much. I haven't read to know exactly what he thought behind his translations, Quotidianum.
Did you say Beza?
Theodore de Beze, D-B-E-Z-E.
say Jesus coined for, you said communion?
This one, the Busius. Okay. Now, I don't know if he spoke it in Greek, but he did. The word he used in Aramaic, if he used Aramaic, translated into that. Because Matthew and Luke, who have the prayer, both have the same word for this bread. And the word bread is in the prayer, but it's preceded by a Busius. So it's a special bread. All right, and then there's one more thing that, do I have time to go into that? All right, real quick. The last word of the our Father is evil, and deliver us from evil. Okay, when you hear the word deliver us from evil, what do you think? What words conjured up in your mind? What kind of evil are we talking about? Satan, but deliver us from evil. Evil is in general. Evil is like war and hunger and pestilence and immorality, pornography. I mean, that's evil. Cruelty, anything bad that you can think of, that's evil. That's not what the Our Father is talking about. Cindy knows Greek, so she came up with the answer immediately. But evil, deliver us from evil, like save us from this disease, right? It applies to different situations in life, but it's very vague. Well, in Greek, in Greek you have, this is the Greek, which you see an article here, and okay? And this article means of the evil. What is of the evil? It makes it a noun, a noun that is very specific, not evil in general, of the evil. And as Cynthia said, the evil one is Satan. To save us from Satan, not from the disease or whatever is around us. Satan. Very different from the evil. And that's all I am going to say about that today. Do you have any questions?
You have a question over there?
Okay. So I've always, there was kind of like a debate over translate Catholic Christian about a year ago. So, but when it says and lead us not into temptation, this is unrelated. So I just thought maybe. But when he says and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So that kind of seems like is but actually a good translation. It seems like it's a change of expectations, like, but also do that. Like, it seems almost redundant. You know what I mean by that? Like, why would, is that correct? Maybe it's an error in our English translation.
It's a lot in front of it. It has a but in front of it.
So it's the same way we would say, like, I mean, it's just strange that leads not temptation, but like
Instead, yeah. So it doesn't make good sense to you, is that what you're saying?
It never has.
It never has. For most people, what doesn't make good sense is the word lead. Because they say, okay, God doesn't lead, and that's Bob's objection to it. Don't lead us, but deliver us, in other words. But even the idea, what, and Father may have a better answer to that, is that don't remove your grace so that we permit us to Because when we sin, obviously grace is removed. And we get believe and we get burned. And so, protect us from that burning, essentially. I don't know, Father, would you like to?
Yeah, I think the sense is, and let us not be led into temptation, which Tatiana said. I mean, so there's more problems in the English translation of this prayer. I mean, for example, trespasses is not what it says. I mean, literally, it's debts. And now, then there's an argument to be made that it was a metaphor for trespasses, sure, but that's, again, learn the Greek, you'll see that that's not actually what it says. That's an interpretation. Now, we agree that that's the correct interpretation, but that's one of the things that being able to read will illumine.
Oh yeah, pretty much every word is problematic, but we have to live it ourselves. I feel that I didn't give you a good answer about the but it is in there. That's the only thing that is in there. And nobody does that, so yeah. All right. What I have next is a handout with the alphabet and 4 main conventions of Greek pronunciation. Should we go into that? Yeah, just a few words. We're not going to go into the alphabet, but a few words about the pronunciations. Okay. The pronunciation of the alphabet in modern Greek, there is a pronunciation, but Greek has been spoken for 4,000 years, and 4,000 years the language evolves, right? Your word night, K-N-I-G-H-T, has a lot of letters that don't pronounce anymore. At some point they were pronouncing them. That's why they're there. So you see the evolution of the pronunciation. So here we are 4,000 years later from what, whatever Homer or before they were speaking. So at some point in the 16th century, Erasmus said, well, the pronunciation of the Greek is not what the modern Greeks are using today, but it was different. And based on various clues, he restored it to what the ancients, the way the ancients pronounced it. Obviously, we don't have an ancient to tell us that we were correct in that restoration or not. But he did the best he could. Now, that's the Erasmian pronunciation, which in America we use when we teach ancient Greek, because that's a convention, that's what everybody uses. However, I spoke of a convention. It's a terrible convention. A terrible convention. I'll tell you why. Homer's pronunciation was not the same pronunciation as Socrates, was not the same pronunciation as Alexander's, was not the same pronunciation as Matthew who was writing or Paul who was writing, because the pronunciation evolved. So which one are we restoring? And not only that, the Americans have their own Erasmian pronunciation. The French have their own Erasmian pronunciation where everything is stressed from the last syllable. The Germans have their own Erasmian because they have some diphthongs. Epsilon iota, for example, they call it I and we call it A. Who is it? It's a terrible convention. In our churches in America, we use the modern Greek pronunciation to pronounce the church Greek. Which is the biblical pronunciation, the historic biblical pronunciation that you see in the second to the last column here. And you will see that it's pretty close, those who restore it, pretty close to the modern Greek pronunciation. So here we will be using actually the modern Greek pronunciation. So some of you who know some ancient Greek and have the Erasmian pronunciation, you may have a little bit of trouble. But we decided that for the sake of our Greek or this church's parishioners, we're going to use this pronunciation. Obviously, you read it and you translate it. You don't speak it to communicate. So it's not a big problem, but we have to make a decision. Does this answer your question, Loretta, about pronunciation? No, it doesn't answer it? She will have a talk. Okay, Jim, it's yours.
Okay, we're gonna wrap up. If you're like me, you want to get your money back. I was told the people who translated the Bible into King James English used the original Greek text. And I think, now, what were they thinking? So, I mean, there's more to come. A couple of housekeeping notes. If you have friends or people you know that want to take this class that didn't come tonight, you're welcome to come next time. If you skip a class, don't worry, you're not going to fall behind. We're all going to go at our own speed as well as we can. Some people will be ahead of others, not a problem. We're all learning together. So if you miss a class, if you say, oh, I can't come, I'll be 30 minutes late, come. And it's not going to be a problem for you or us. And then if you have Black's textbook, there's a section on pronunciation. If there isn't, and don't pay any attention to it, take a pair of scissors and cut those pages out. And do something with them. I had a lot of trouble using this book with people. A year later, what says here? I should say that. Don't look at that. So Tatiana will give you the correct pronunciation. And then I think we're done.
Thank you all for coming. This was a good kind of introduction to the kind of things we're going to be learning. As you see, we're recording today's session. So if you miss a class, you just let us know and we'll send you the recording. If you know people who want to come and join us next week or the following weeks, we'll be able to provide them this recording. So God bless you all. I'm glad you came here tonight. I hope you enjoy it, and you'll see, and I hope you'll join us again next Tuesday at the same time.
You're not putting it on hold. You're not putting it on hold.
Through the prayers of our Holy Father, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen.